Now, I want to pivot just a little bit.
Sure.
This is a little bit more of a controversial topic for some because there's a lot of passions on in whether you're on one side or the other. It's the theatrical versus the streaming end of it. And Chapek kind of and Chapek likes to do this, I think. He kind of his comments about Encanto, I think could very well be.
It's our new franchise.
It's our new franchise, and there's a lot going on here. So let's discuss this real quick, because there's a lot to talk about with this. And this is courtesy of WDWNT.com. It says here, Disney CEO Bob Chapek cites Encanto as proof that streaming is the future. Fastest title to meet 200 million hours on D+. And it kind of goes on to say here that essentially that Encanto suffered from a poor box office, but within days of its release on D+, it began trending worldwide and merchandise sales increased. Chapek also repeatedly referred to Encanto as a franchise, as Alia just mentioned, through whether he is referencing more content or just including more merchandise remains to be seen. So this is fascinating. And Dre, I'll start with you because Dre, you're more of that theater perspective. You love the theater experience, you do. Yeah. What are your thoughts in regards to Chapek's comments? Is it discouraging? Is it out of touch? How do you feel about what he's saying here in regards to Encanto?
No, I think he's, as we say all the time, I think he's following the data. I mean, look, I think when it comes to these kind of films, and this is why I think a lot of people are miffed at Pixar, but when you really think about it, Pixar are kind of those 4 quadrant films that really bring out families and people with extended families and so forth to the theaters, and now that prospect I think has changed a little bit, and consumer patterns and trends have changed as a result. And so I think that's why, I mean, we saw this with Trolls in 2020, right? We saw we saw a lot of momentum for family films when it came to the streaming side than we did with the theatrical side, right? And I think he's kind of looking at that. I think he's kind of saying, hey, look, this theatrical release of this movie didn't really do that well, but on streaming it did extremely well. And I think that's a result of the consumer patterns changing within the demographics. I think for event pictures, I think for films that, where you have maybe a younger audience, maybe doesn't have kids, maybe is going on a date, maybe has, a couple of buddies, they're going to be looking at the theatrical experience much differently than maybe than maybe a family would. And so I think like films like Encanto or even Pixar and so forth, I think they do have a home on Disney Plus, at least until maybe theatrical, maybe the consumer patterns change. But for right now, I think the event films like Spider-Man No Way Home, like Shang-Chi and others, I think they do have a home in the theatrical space. Maybe not necessarily everything going to one or the other without taking those kind of things into account.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And this is really kind of a lot of times the discussion around this stuff is either it kind of comes down to like an either or scenario. And Dre, you mentioned you really brought up the nuance that really is, I think, the reality of what we're going through here. I don't think any of this debate is either or. Like, it's really going to be data driven. It's going to be option driven. It's going to be, like you said, Spider-Man No Way Home, Doctor Strange, Multiverse of Madness, event films are going to be more driven and more, more that theatrical experience. You have these smaller family films like Encanto, which will be more driven on like the streaming platforms. It is very much option based. But Alia, what are your thoughts on Chapek's comments in regards to Encanto and, kind of like reaffirming this whole thing about these family films really doing well on D+?
Well, I think he's also responding to people claiming that franchises can't be built off streaming. He's saying, well, explain Encanto. It didn't take off till it was on Disney+. Sure. I think ideally, because I'm an AMC A-list member, I'm okay with the theatrical experience. I don't want that to go away. I think ideally they would like to do the 30 days in theaters and then Disney Plus, or 45 days in theater and then Disney Plus. But they're not going to continue that if by chance the film underperforms, if media, especially pro-theatrical media, states it's disappointing, it flopped, it's a failure. Why would Disney continue then to put out their movies risking such headlines when if they take them straight to Disney Plus, they're not going to get such a headline? So in a way, a lot of the pro-theatrical media is shooting themselves in the foot when they then are, Encanto failed, Encanto flopped.
Well, that's a good point, because, look, you take something like Star Wars Solo, the Solo film. I mean, I think that film would have been better served if it didn't have those headlines of the first Star Wars flop ever. If it would have been a direct, we're talking totally hypothetical, after the fact kind of thing. But if that movie would have went straight to Disney Plus, you wouldn't have had those headlines. Would the perception of that film and its success or failure have been different if it didn't have those headlines? Probably so. What do you think, Dre?
No, I think that's exactly why Disney likes the streaming space, because they can control that narrative so much more effectively than having, box office figures, be wide open to the public, right? I mean, if we're kind of this metric driven when it comes to success or failure, to be able to control those metrics so well, or at least to maybe look at them from a different perspective and, shoot that out as the narrative going forward. I mean, that's a very attractive proposition, especially when it, like you said, OG, when it comes to the perception of a film, when it comes to the reception of a film from, Wall Street's end. I mean, I think that was one of the big benefits of doing it this way. There's not really they're getting better, I will say, but there's not really a good way of gauging success or failure when it comes to Disney Plus in the same way that you can with box office. And I think Chapek's kind of big thing, moreover, is he talks about the zeitgeist. He talks about the pop culture and so to speak. And that was kind of one of the things that I was saying before, was the impact on culture, right? How much buzz is this certain product generating or not generating and so forth. And it's clear with Encanto, what he's trying to present is, hey, look, we did get an increase in sales. We didn't get an increase in kind of user generated traffic, not just with Disney, not just on Disney Plus, but with social media and so forth. People were really talking about it. And I think that, that is kind of a defining thing for Disney going forward, I think.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Go ahead, Ali. I'm sorry.
Oh, I was going to say the pro-theatrical crowd kind of tried to stir it up again, because Sing 2 recently grossed 300 million, a little bit over 300 million. So they went again with the Encanto or Turning Red. And it's just, guys, either movie cost 100 million, you make your point, but Disney spends at least 150 million plus on their animated features, both from Walt Disney Animation Studios and Pixar. You're still not making the point. If anything, you're just reminding Disney they would have wasted more money. So
correct.
It's just
correct. Yeah. That's a terrible argument when you work with those figures.